Hi, let's start with Gabriel Garcia Marquez. As you know, he's a Colombian author who is famous for magic realism, a technique that he introduced in literary writing. And he is most famous for the boom in Latin American literature. Um, so, Gabriel Garcia Marquez was raised by his grandparents, and his magical imagination, was a gift of his grandmother, who used to tell him fantastic stories. And his political acumen came from his grandfather, who was very interested in politics, and what he saw around him, the kind of conflicts, again, in a post-colonial context, the um, the the problems that colonialism itself created, and the resultant elite class who became the ruling class, and the corruption in the class becomes a point of criticism in his later work, specifically this story, which is all about politics and which is all about the complete exploitation of the poor classes again. And there are beautifully placed magic realism elements throughout the story. Death Constant Beyond Love is a story of Senator Onesimo Sanchez, and he's a person who is a very corrupt politician who knows that the promises that he's making to the people are completely false, are that they can never come true. So in a way, he is like the politicians that we see around us every day. Big promises, a lot of noise, a lot of aplomb, but specifically not in the Western countries, but specifically in the post-colonial countries, the kind of politicians who become very popular for people because they manage to appeal to people are the politicians who display a lot, the politicians who come with big convoys, the politicians who make big claims, because the people themselves are not educated enough to understand in many ways that these people are deluding them. So realistic representation of something has less impact as compared to big flowery speeches, and they become an issue. Now, the story begins from the very beginning with the theme of death, that Senator Onesimo Sanchez had 6 months and 11 days to go before his death. Now, and then in the next paragraph, the line, he the happiest of all until they told him 3 months before that he would be dead forever by next Christmas. It's a very interesting way of his narration. That's the way a lot of his work, a lot of Marquez's work is written, this concept of, he would be dead forever, and that he had a very specific number of time or amount of days in which to live or not to live. So the story talks about his affair with this half French girl, Laura Farina, and talks about how in the last 6 months of his life this completely destroyed his image, his legacy, and everything. What I would like you to focus on is this theme of loneliness versus material prosperity that he makes, basically shows throughout. This senator is a very rich man. He is a very successful man. He has a successful marriage. He has children. He has a career which seems to be going really, really well. But at the same time, when somebody tells him about that he is going to die, things change. He realizes that everything that he has gained doesn't seem to have meaning. Because if you have lived your life, I guess, in a way which has helped someone, which you're leaving something good behind you, you feel or you find some kind of meaning. But he finds that meaning is completely lacking. So there are a few things which represent this corruption, and I would like you to read with me and go over them. Now, on page number 911, you see a second paragraph. It says, "It was an unavoidable stop in the electoral campaign he made every 4 years." So he comes to this place simply for getting votes. And this place is a very, very, it's not a nice place. The carnival wagons had arrived in the morning. Imagine, it's a political campaign and he is entertaining the voters by having carnival wagons. Then came the trucks with the rented Indians, so a population, the native population of that place. This also talks about the racism and the poverty that this discriminated race experiences. Who were carried into the town in order to enlarge the crowds at public ceremonies. So imagine how fake it is, the whole idea to propagate the idea that this politician is popular among people. You rent people also. A short time before 11 o'clock, along with the music and rockets and jeeps of the retinue, the ministerial automobile, the color of strawberry soda, arrived. Senator Onisimo Sanchez was placed in weatherless inside the air-conditioned car. But as soon as he opened the door, he was shaken by a gust of fire, and his shirt of pure silk was soaked in a kind of light-colored soup, and he felt many years older and more alone than ever. Again, the theme of loneliness, the theme of solitude that is present in the story begins again. Death, solitude, and love. Repeatedly, these three themes you will see repeated within a post-colonial context, within the context of what he's critiquing the government, he's critiquing the Colombian government, and he's critiquing the politicians and the way they live their life. So, which is a direct consequence, as we have studied with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a direct consequence of colonialism. So he also carries, there's a lot of symbolism here. He also carries a rose that he has been trying to save, and the rose can symbolize his life. The rose can symbolize love, because again, love in the story, it shows it doesn't last. His life is about to end. He's taking care of it. He's trying to keep it alive, and that symbolism is very important. Also, the symbolism of the fake show that is being created for the public. Now, I would also argue, with in view of his impending death, the way he is feeling about the voters and about the public who has turned out to see him is very interesting. So look at this. Nevertheless, the erosion of death was much more pernicious than he had supposed. This means that what the impending death had done, it had changed something essential within him. He had realized the futility and the meaninglessness of what he had been doing all his life. Went up onto the platform, he felt a strange disdain for those who were fighting for the good luck to shake his hand. And he didn't feel sorry, as he had at other times, for the groups of barefoot Indians who could scarcely bear the hot saltpeter coals of the sterile little square. So you imagine the poverty that is present here, the extreme poverty that is being depicted, and yet he doesn't feel sorry for it, because now he is immersed in his own loneliness and his fear of death. He silenced the applause with a wave of his hand, almost with rage, and he began to speak without gestures, his eyes fixed on the sea, which was sighing with heat. So now he's standing there and he's speaking. And I would like you to take a minute and look at his speech, which is very, very important, because he teaches the prosperity gospel as well. "We are here for the purpose of defeating nature," he began, "against all his convictions." So he himself does not believe in what he is saying at all. And that also gives you a little bit of an idea of Marquez's criticism in this stance. "We will no longer be foundlings in our own country." Again, you see a reference to the colonial aspect, that because now we're over, we will no longer be foundlings, we will no longer be people who are obliged to other people or the colonizers in our own country, because this is our land. But does he really mean that? Because he is part of that elite class. He is exploiting these people in the same way that the colonizers did, right? So orphans of God in a realm of thirst and bad climate. So the situation, the extremely unhealthy situation that the people are living in. Exiles in our own land. "We will be different people, ladies and gentlemen, we will be a great and happy people. I'm sure that those things ring true to you, those things you've heard before in political speeches, and those are the same kind of promises he's making here. And now, Gabriel Garcia Marquez comments on his, there's an editorial comment which is very interesting, which I would like you to take a minute and look at. There was a pattern to this circus. So he's being called, this whole political campaign, Marquez is calling it a circus. And then he creates an imagery of circus as well, and then adds magic realism elements to it. And it's very interesting because is it actually happening? Or is it a metaphor for the kind of things or the dreams, imaginative dreams that politicians weave when they are making a speech? Is it all the things that he's saying in terms of words? Or is it actually happening? That is left to the reader's imagination, and that is where the magic realism elements come in. So he says, there was a pattern to his circus as he spoke his aides threw clusters of paper birds into the air, and the artificial creatures took on life. Artificial creatures, again, all the fake artificial promises that he's making. Now, they can be words or they can be actual things. Flew about the platform of planks and went out to sea. At the same time, other men took some prop trees with felt leaves, again, very fake, very artificial, out of the wagons and planted them in the saltpeter soil behind the crowd. They finished by setting up a cardboard facade with make-believe houses of red brick that had glass windows, and with it they covered the miserable real-life shacks. So if you notice, it's really beautifully written, because he's mentioning how politicians do this kind of thing, that his people are taking things out of those cardboard wagons and they're placing them and hiding the miserable real situation of the people. Now, it's up to you how you interpret it. Do you think that they're actually taking out those things, or do you think this is another element of magic realism, that the words that he's saying are weaving the image which in the public's mind is replacing their miserable position with these images of glory and with these images of prosperity? Then in this next paragraph he mentions, the senator prolonged his speech with 2 quotations in Latin in order to give the farce more time. So what he's doing, again, he's calling it a farce because he's being sarcastic about it at the same time, but he's saying that he's using the Latin phrases to basically impress people, make them more riveted. He promised rain-making machines, portable breeders for table animals. Think about the kind of things that are being promised. Completely unrealistic things. The oils of happiness which would make vegetables grow in the saltpeter and clumps of pansies in the window boxes. When he saw that his fictional world was all set up, he pointed to it. That's the way it will be for us, ladies and gentlemen. He shouted, look, that's the way it will be for us. So now he is pointing towards the fictional world that his aides have created, or his words have created, and he says, look at it. The audience turned around. An ocean liner made of painted paper was passing behind the houses, and it was taller than the tallest houses in the artificial city. Only the senator himself noticed that since it had been set up and taken down and carried from one place to another, the superimposed cardboard town had been eaten away by the terrible climate, and that it was almost as poor and dusty as Rosal del Valle. Very beautifully put, this whole narration, and this is the thing, this is the place which tells you about the corruption that is left by the colonizers and the critique that Marquez is directing towards it. He's critiquing this group of people who are exploiting the limitedness and the poverty of these poor people. And this is where another person comes in the story, the French convict and murderer Nelson Farina, who had murdered and butchered, quartered his first wife, and because of that he had in prison, he had broken away, he had run over to Colombia, and he is there, and he keeps asking the senator to give him a fake identity, and the senator keeps refusing. And this person, when he came here, he brought a woman with him who was very beautiful, and he has a daughter who becomes the woman that the senator has an affair with, Laura Farina. And what I would like you to notice in all of this is that the position of women as well. The senator is immediately struck by the beauty of Laura Farina, and her father realizes that and sees an opportunity to actually capitalize on the situation. He does not think of his daughter. He does not think of her value as a human being. He thinks of her value as a commodity. And he dresses her up in the best possible clothes, and he sends her to the senator's house to basically make the senator provide him with the fake identity. And the senator, who usually might not have responded, but because his death is imminent, decides that, oh well, maybe this will relieve his loneliness in some way. And now a thing that you need to understand is that he is not only interested in Laura Farina from a sexual point of view. He is interested in her from a point of view of companionship and love as well, because if you see the last line of the story, it is that that he was weeping with rage at dying without her. For so whatever happened afterwards, he died alone still. And that tells you a little bit about the kind of problems or the kind of loneliness that this kind of life promotes, and the materialistic life kind of promotes. So now in another way, the senator is also Marquez presents the senator alone with other people, talking about the real situation or the reality of the situation that he has not mentioned in any of his speeches. He's talking about the fact that you guys need me more, you need to support me, and this place, it is, in order to remain in power, we need to keep these people as subjugated and as miserable as possible. That tells you the sad, miserable reality. What is the difference between these governments and the colonizers who had governed these people before? Both are exploiting them for money. There is no difference except that these are your own people who are exploiting you. But this is a class that was created by the colonizers to help them govern, and the colonizers left this class, and this extreme degradation and dehumanization of human beings that had taken place emerges in stories of this kind. And Marquez is taking this opportunity to criticize it. If you see page number 914, where the senator is saying, we of course can't eat paper birds. You and I know that there are trees and flowers in this heap of goat dung. See what he's calling this city. The day there are shad instead of worms in the water holes, that day neither you nor I will have anything to do here. Do I make myself clear? So he's talking about his own opportunity rather than the people he is supposed to be serving, which is a very, very sad reality. And then there is the concept of the purple butterfly that Sandra makes, and he throws away, and it goes out and becomes part of the wall, and Laura Farina looks at it and tries to take it away from the wall. And the guards wake up and they say, oh, it is painted on the wall. Again, magic realism. Now, I would like you to think a minute on it. What does the butterfly symbolize here? What does it mean? Does it mean, a mistake or a decision made in the heat of the moment that sticks forever? It might be something that is taken in, thrown away. Is it symbolism? Does it mean that? I mean, think about it. I would like to see your interpretations and the answers. And then we move on to the part where the senator decides that yes, he's going to have an affair with this girl. And lastly, he finds out that the girl is wearing a chastity belt with a lock on it, and the young girl, who's also scared and a little bit worried, tells him that she can go to her father and get it if he signs, the papers, because those are the things that her father has told her to do. This actually is the point where I would like you to take a minute and reflect on the position of women. The first woman that I would like you to look at is the senator's wife, which is who is just mentioned in passing. She's a woman who is cheated on. She's a woman who has kids and position and everything, but she's a woman who is nothing more than a few words or sentences. Then we have Laura Farina, the child, I would say, who is sold for the for her father's, will, and who doesn't know how to rebel, who probably knows that if she doesn't do what she's being told, she would suffer consequences, even though she doesn't know how to, she doesn't know how to say no. And a child who is also overawed by the money. There's the whole magical, the technique of magical realism, when she comes in and she sees the notes flying everywhere. That can be a reference to only the fact that this is a very rich place and there is are extremely costly things around. But the way he presents it is very interesting. What is her position? She's a commodity that can be sold to gain her father the identity that he craves. And think about her father's first wife, the woman he murdered, the woman he not only murdered but quartered, because it's actually pretty strikingly horrific, the place where he mentions it. He listened to the speech from the hammock amidst the remains of the siesta under the cool bower of a house of unplaned boards which he had built with the same pharmacist's hands with which he had drawn and quartered his first wife, and then plants her in her own patch of petunias. That is mentioned in the story, which is horrific. Suddenly, in the middle of this magical idea, this fake corrupted circus of a politician's campaign. It jolts you to reality. It jolts you to the reality of people like him being present, and then it jolts you to the idea of who is the person who is being victimized here. He's being allowed to live here. He's a convict. No one is punishing him, and he's a murderer. He's on the run from the law. And then, even worse, the other woman, the mother of Laura Farina, who died on her own, which saved her from the same fate as the first wife. What was her position? She wasn't his wife. She was a woman, a beautiful woman, but her position was nothing. She was just another name, a person that he took up with. And then this murderer was allowed to bring up a daughter. Should he have had access to her? Should he have brought up this person? So I would like you to take a minute and think about those ideas, because they talk about, in this way, Marquez is criticizing the position of the weak, the position of the minorities, and how they are used as commodities by these people. So I would like you to look at the psychological conflicts present in the story, the magical realism techniques that Garcia Marquez employs, the concept of the paper butterfly, the flying money, the paper birds. What do those represent in the story? The themes of politics, society, honor, poverty, deception, death, loneliness, position of women specifically, and the concept of love. Also focus on the futility of material success when compared to when put in sharp contrast with the reality and finality of death. I hope you enjoyed the story, and you liked all these 3 stories very much, and you learned a little bit about world literature and post-colonial literature. Thank you.